The cold snow swept through the tabby socks as you hurriedly staggered through the winter landscape. Adrenaline pumped through your veins, hot and frantic, but your legs still trembled from exhaustion, each step threatening to buckle. The Uberishiki Manor had been breached by Muzan, and Kayaka has passed. The demon slayers in Hashira had fallen into an extra-denominal stronghold, the Infinity Castle, where the final battle against Muzan and the 12 Kizuki had begun. Despite your body's protest, you forced yourself to move faster, the crunch of snow beneath your feet drowned out by the defensing rush of blood in your ears. Unfortunately, you didn't even make it at least 10 feet from the temple as the cold bit at your ankles. Yin-chan, get back here! Loki's voice ripped through the howling wind as he lunged forward, his fingers barely grazing the back of your kosai before you crumbled into the snow with a choked gasp, the rough ground pressed against your knees and palms, your arms shaking violently as they failed to push your body back up. The bright red color of your habaka soon stood out sharply against this white snow as you breathed harshly, shoulders heaving, as Loki crunched down under his breath. As he hurled you upright, his grip brushingly tight on your forearm, not out of anger but of concern. His eyes flickered with something you'd never seen before, pure unguarded panic, as snowflakes caught in his dark lashes. You can barely stand, let alone walk. His voice cracked like thin ice underfoot. I have to get back, you gasped through chattering teeth, vision swimming. I can't stay here. The phantom echo of Oba-chan's warning about untaunted threads pulsated in your skull as Thoki's grip shifted on your shoulders, his face inches away from yours, enough that you could see the veins pulsating at his temples. You're in no condition to travel. You need to stay here and recover, he growled, but the words were laced with something bitterly underneath the anger. I can't. Thoki flinched at your raw scream, the sound tearing from your throat like a wounded animal's. Your fingers clawed at his sleeves, nails catching on the rough fabric as your voice shattered into something distant. Kayaka's gone. The war is now. You turned to him with tears in your eyes. Please, Thoki, I have to get back to Kojiro. Thoki's grip faltered for a second, just long enough for you to see the Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard, his dark eyes flickering with something unreadable before his expression hardened again. With a rough exhale through his nose, he suddenly yanked you forward, pressing your face into the rough wool of the Hohori, as his other hand fumbled with his belt. Damn it all, he muttered, the vibration of his voice rumbling through your temple where it rested against his collarbone. The scent of wood and frost clung to him as something heavy and warm settled over your shoulders. He then took two of his fingers and whistled sharply. The high-pitched sound sliced through the winter like a blade, a single piercing note that lingered in the frozen air. For one heartbeat, then two, then there was only wind. Then came the sound of thunder of hooves pounding through snow, and a massive stallion burst through the tree line, dark mane flying like a war hammer, eyes rolling white with adrenaline. The beast skidded to a halt before you both, steam blowing from its flared nostrils as it stammered impatiently, its iron-shoved hooves clinking underneath the ice. It already had a saddle on, strapped on, as Thoki must have prepared it before coming to find you. Easy there, bud, Thoki muttered, pressing his palm flattened against the stallion's heaving flank. Before mounting in one fluid motion, his jaw was set on his exhausted state and a hand down to you. Well, don't just stand there gawking. You wanted to go, didn't you? The moment your fingers touched his, he hauled you up effortlessly, setting you in front of him with your back pressed flush against his chest. His arms beckoned at you as he grabbed the reins. Hold on, he yelled, whispering in the reins as the stallion reared before surging forward in a storm of flying snow. The wind hurled at your clothes, biting into your skin like needles, but the warmth of Thoki's body kept you anchored as the landscape blurred into streams of white and shadow. Within the butterfly estate, things were descending into chaos. It's been nearly 20 minutes since Muzan attacked on the Uberishiki mansion and the Demon Slayer's descendant into Demon's Lair. After Muzan retreated, injured young slayers were taken back to the butterfly estate by the Kushiki. Some were still breathing and groaning in pain, missing a limb, while others had wounds that bled profusely. Ayoi's hands trembled as she pressed a blood-soaked bandage against the Slayer's gut wound, a metallic tang coating the air. Across the room, Ruru calmly worked, stitching the wound of an injured Demon Slayer's leg. Her fingers steady, but her lips pressed into a thin line. Her white apron and latex gloves were splattered with red as she wiped her forehead from her forearm. Koyo, Sumu, and Naho darted between cots and fresh bandages, medicine, and water, their expressions determined but tinged with exhaustion. Meanwhile, Senjiro sat in the hallway next to the end table as he continued to cradle his crying nephew in his arms. Tayu's face was red and blotchy from tears, his small fist clenching at Senjiro's Hayuji. He was weeping. There, Tayo. It's okay. Senjiro's voice crackled since he was rocking the toddler in his arms. The scent of osmotic hung in the air, thick enough to be tasted. He tried to give the baby his bottle, but Tayo refused to drink. His little face crumpled as he twisted away from it with a disdained whimper. Senjiro felt his throat tinged. Tayo hadn't stopped crying since he had woken, when everything had begun into chaos. Musa's attack on the Ubershiki estate, Ubershiki-sama's death, and the demon slayer's descent into the Infinity Castle. Senjiro had ordered him to take refuge here with Tayo and look after Kojiro while he went back to help Uzui protect young Karaka, Ubershiki, and the demon slayer's new leader. Senjiro continued to force a smile, humming an off-key of lullaby as he rocked the incomplete toddler. But despite his best efforts, Senjiro only knew Tayo needed most right now. Someone whose scent and warmth could instantly soothe him. But she wasn't here. Oni-chan, where are you? Senjiro thought desperately, his arms tightening protectively around Tayo as the toddler's cries hitched into ragged hiccups. Rengoku-san, please! Exclaimed the voice of Kayo. Senjiro glanced up only to see the eyes of his brother widened with shock to see the wobbling forward down the hallway, his cane tapping unevenly against the wooden floorboards. You mustn't be out of bed, said Sumi. You are in no condition to move, Naho added. Kojiro ignored them. His one good eye was burning with a feverish intent despite the pallor on his face. Each step, fresh pain launching throughout his still healing ribs. The wound on his chest protested angrily, and the angry scar blooming red as he ignores the pain with gritted teeth. Nii-chan! Senjiro stood abruptly. Tayo clenched tightly against his chest, but Kojiro barely glanced his way, his gaze fixed on the estate's entrance, like a possessed man. Senjiro-kun, please stop your brother. He's trying to leave. The three girls said in unison with panic as Kojiro scampered past them, his cane slipping on a streak of blood smeared across the floorboards. He caught himself against the wall with a sharp grunt, his fingers dragging into the wood grain hard enough to splinter it. You must listen to them, Oni-san. Senjiro's voice wavered as he stepped forward, Tayu's tiny fist twisting in his collar. The toddler wailed loudly at the sight of his father, tiny arms reaching out desperately towards Kojiro. Senjiro. Tayo. Kojiro's voice crackled like dry kindling as he reached out blindly towards the sun, his fingers trembling inches from the toddler's outstretched arms before his knees buckled. He collapsed against the wall, with a muffled groan and his cane shattering to the floor. Oni-san! Senjiro lunged forward as Kojiro's legs gave out entirely, barely managing to catch him with one arm while still clutching to Tayo. The impact sent a jolt through his spine. Kojiro was heavier than he remembered, muscles still dense with the memory of battle despite months of stillness. Hold on, we'll go get Ruru. Kayo, Sumo, and Naho scrambled down the hallway, their small footsteps pattering against the wooden floorboards like romantic raindrops. Kojiro's breath came in ragged gasps, his forehead pressed against Senjiro's shoulder as Tayo whirled between them, tiny fingers finally catching fistfuls of his father's yakata. The fabric crumpled in the toddler's grip, threads springing as they mirrored Kojiro's own unwavering resolve. Please, you need to rest, Oni-san, Senjiro whispered, feeling the terrors wrecking Kojiro's frame. The way his brother's fingers dug into his sleeves like claws, as if trying to anchor himself against the tide of pain. Tayo's wails softened into sundering sobs now that he was pressed against his father's chest, his tiny face buried in the hollow of Kojiro's throat where his pulse hammered wildly. The scent of amphoretic and tea clung to Kojiro's skin, layered over something deeper, the sharp, edged tang of desperation. I can't. Kojiro's voice was barely a whisper, his fingers tangling in Tayo's hair as he staggered to stand upright. I have to protect. Kojiro's grip tightened around them both, Kojiro's weight staggering heavier against him, and Tayu's tiny body wedged between them like a fragile barrier against the war that's happening between in a sudden secret location. Kojiro's hand trembled against Tayu's back, his breath ragged as he inhaled the scent of his son's hair, milky and sweet. The toddler's whispers hiccuped into quiet, wet sniffles, his tiny fist kneading at Kojiro's yakata as if trying to mold himself back into the safety of his father's arms. I have to fight, he rasped, sweat running down his temple as he forced himself upright again, only for his vision to swim violently. The hallway tilting like a capsizing ship, his legs buckled completely this time, sending him crashing to his knees, with Senjo barely catching Taiyo before he tumbled into Kojiro's arms. The toddler let out a startled wail as his father collapsed forward, palms slamming against the floorboards with a snap like a snapped rib. You are in no condition to fight, Oni-san. Senjo's voice broke as he crouched beside his brother, one arm cradling the still infant, while the other pressed against Kojiro's heaving shoulders. The flame husher's fingers clawed at the wood, splinters embedding beneath his nails as he tried but failed to push himself up. His body betrayed him from ever-shuddering breath. The throbbing pain in his chest flared, a cruel reminder of the wound still healing. Damn it to hell, Kojiro felt utterly and completely helpless, his fingers curling into fists, nails digging crescents into his palms as he intimately listened to the pain groans and grunts of his fellow slayers being tended to, all while knowing the war was happening now. His breasts were ragged and shallow, his chest feeling like it was being crushed by a boulder. It can't be. It couldn't. He refused to let it end like this. Kojiro grounded his teeth hard enough to make blood seep through, his vision tunneling as he strained against the weakness shuddering his limbs. Somewhere, his comrades, including young Tanjiro, were fighting while he laid crumpled like a discarded armor. The innocent cries of his son, the pain groans of wounded slayers, and the feeling of exhaustion dread, each sensation carved deeper into his ribs than Akaza's first ever had. All of this frustrated Kojiro. Damn, if only I weren't so weak. If only. His thoughts began trailing off until he went to vertigo. His vision tunneled into pinpricks. The lights of his pupils hammered against his eardrums. His fingers scrumpled uselessly against the floorboard, the wood grains biting his skin as he fought to push himself up, only for his arms to give out again with a shudder that racked his entire frame. Oni-san! Senjiro cried out as Kojiro fell onto his side, his breath coming in shallow gasps, eyes dulling like blanket embers, and Kojiro's ears rang as he waited to feel the cold hardwood floor against his cheek. Ko! The hardwood never came. Instead, warmth enveloped him. A scent of pine trees and snow filled his senses, accompanied by the sight of something white and red. Hands held him mid-collapse, fingers digging into his shoulders with a bruising force that you slid to your knees beside him. Your breath came in ragged pants, lips parting against his name, half sobbed, half shout, as you pulled him upright against your chest, your heartbeat hammering against his temple where it rested against your collarbone. Nii-chan! Senjiro cried, crackled through the air like shattered porcelain in both surprise and relief at the sight of you. Tears of joy spilled down his cheeks. God, he was happy to see you alive and safe. But more importantly, here. Taiyo's wails pitched higher as he desperately reached for you, tiny arms outstretched, fingers grasping, as your coulson like drowning man clawing for shore. Snowflower? The name Kojiro gave to you tore through you like ragged whispers. Half belief, half a prayer. His trembling fingers clenched at your sleeve, his good eye wide and unblinking, as though you might vanish if he looked away for even a second. I'm here. I've got you, my flame. You choked out, one arm wrapping around his shoulder while the other caught Taiyu, pulling both of them against your chest. Taiyu immediately buried his face against your neck as the sobs dissolved into sobering hiccups, his small body going boneless with relief. But Kojiro's breath hitched, his hands reaching up to cup the side of your face, as if needing the solid warmth of you to comfort. This wasn't another fever dream. The scent of winter clung to you. Just where have you been? He inwardly wondered, but the words died in his throat when you leaned down and pressed your lips against his temple. Hot, alive, real. Kojiro shuddered, the storm purging his thoughts quietly for a few moments in time. I'm sorry for leaving. I wish I was here when you woke up. You then turned your attention towards your baby, pressing a kiss to his forehead before whispering soothing words against Tayu's tear-streaked cheeks, his small hand still holding onto you tightly as if you might disappear like smoke. Same goes for you, my little spark, you muttered against Tayu's hair, your voice thick in unshred tears as you rocked him gently. Senjiro watched silently as a wistful smile grazed his lips. He's happy to see the three of you reunited again, despite the war raging somewhere far from the butterfly estate. For this brief moment, there was peace. Rengoku-san! Ruru's voice sliced through the hallway's tension like a scalpel. Her usual serene features twisted into something sharp. With urgency, she rounded the corner with Ayo like a caterpillar's right behind her. However, they each paused upon seeing you, eyes widened, the tension in their bodies freezing mid-motion like stuttered deer. Ah, Miss Rengoku, you returned, Ruru said, revealed to see you. Then her eyes flickered down to Kojo's stumped form against your chest, his breathing ragged and uneven, her brows knitted together as she knelt beside you with the practiced grace of a professional medic. Rengoku-san, you shouldn't be moving about. Your body is still recovering, she muttered. Kojo's fingers clung tighter around your sleeve, the fabric twisting into his grip as he breathed, hitched in his throat. Not from pain, but from the sheer impossibility of letting you go. I must fight, he growled out between clenched teeth, the veins in his neck standing out like cansets. As he tried once more to rise, his body shuddered violently with the effort, sweat forming on his brow. You will die if you push yourself now, Ruru said flatly. Hearing this, you turned to Kojo. How ironic that he's just as stubborn as you were mere hours ago, reckless with the same single-minded desperation that nearly got you killed. Listen to her, Ko, you mumbled, voice raw. Kojo's breath shuddered against your lips, his reminding eye flickering like a glinting flame, caught between fury and helplessness. I know you want to fight and protect everyone, but you can't in this condition. You inwardly giggled, realizing you just sounded like Thoki. Besides, Tayo needs his father. I need you alive, you added, feeling him shudder at your words carved through his resolve like a dull blade. Kojo exhaled sharply. As much as he wanted to protect, the trembling in his limbs betrayed him. He knows his limits. He knows he would collapse before even reaching the battlefield. But acknowledging it tasted like failure. However, it was between you and Tayo his resolve fractures. With the heavy sigh that shuddered through his entire frame, Kojo finally surrendered, not to weakness, but to the quiet plea in your touch, his fingers unclenched from your sleeve, palm pressing flat against your collarbone as he exhaled through his gritted teeth. Okay, he muttered hoarsely, the admiration tasting bitter on his tongue. His eyelids fluttered shut for a brief moment, not long enough for the stubborn tension in his jaw to crack, before he forced himself to meet your gaze again, his remaining eye dulled with expression, but still burning with a dight personality of determination. You smiled softly, your thumb brushing against the sweat beading along his temple, your skin burned beneath your touch. Too hot, feverish, but his pulse steadied under your fingertips. Good husband. Senjiro, Ruru, Ayo, and the caterpillars each realized they needed to give this sigh of relief a go. Ahem. The voice was rough and unexpected, a sharp bark of sound that sent Senjiro, Ruru, and the girls to jump. Thoki stood in the hallway's shadow through a horse, arms crossed, his usual smirk absent as his eyes the wounded and exhausted faces around him. His presence was like a sudden gust of winter wind, unannounced, uninvited, and impossible to ignore. So, I can't help but notice all the wounded people, Thoki said, scrunching his cheeks briskly. Mind if I lend a hand? His grip was loose-lended, but his eyes sharp and menacing scanned the hallway with eerie precision. The incidental thought that crossed Ruru's mind was, big scary mountain man. Before she gave a nod, they needed all the help they could get, even if it was from an unknown stranger she'd never met. Yes, please, she stammered, despite the way her body internally tensed. You smiled only to frown, noting Kojo's lowered gaze, his jaw tightened, hand gripping his cane like he might snap it. Even with you beside him, his thoughts were clearly elsewhere, probably picturing Tanjiro and the others trapped in the nightmare fortress. You brushed your thumb over his knuckles, his skin rough with scars. Everyone's giving it their all, Ko, you muttered. The gods are with them, lending each of them strength, and we must continue to have faith. Kojo exhaled softly, his eyes flickering like a candle in a drift. I know, my love, he muttered, more to himself than you. Although repeating it might take it true, his fingers twitched against his thigh, the ghost of his sword grip, and you could practically see the battlefield reflecting beneath his eyelids. It's just... You knew he felt helpless, trapped in this surreal hallway whilst his comrades were out there saving humanity. You leaned closer until your foreheads touched, your breath mingling with his, warm and alive. You know, a great man once said, set your heart ablaze. You murmured, mimicking Kojiro's signature cadence. To always move forward, never wilting, even if your body feels like it's breaking. You continued, pressing your palm flat against Kojiro's chest where his heartbeat thundered beneath scarred skin. His breath hitched as your fingers traced the edge of his still healing wound through the fabric of his yakata, a physical remember of how close he'd come to breaking the life and death. Sound familiar? You teased, but your voice was still cracking. Kojiro's throat worked silently for a moment, his eyelids lowering halfway as though weighed down by exhaustion and unshed tears. Then, impossibly, a chuckle rumbled deep in his throat, shaking loose some invisible tension as his fingers curled around yours. You are quite some philosopher, my radiant Yukiana, he murmured, his thumb brushing over your knuckles with a deliberate slowness as if memorizing the texture. The ghost of his old grin tugged at his lips, crooked and wounded at the edges, but unmistakably his. Taiyo sniffled between you, tiny fingers clenching as Kojiro's yakata as though sensing the shift in his father's mood. You pressed another kiss to the toddler's forehead, breathing in his milky scent before meeting Kojiro's gaze again, his remaining eye flickering, yours like molten gold held to flames. Learn from the best, you whispered, squeezing his hand tighter, your wedding band cold against his skin. His fingers tightened around yours, sudden, knowing, as though you'd thrown him a lifeline in the middle of drowning. Kojiro believed you, even if he couldn't yet believe in himself. The weight of his surrender sagged against you, his forehead pressing harder into yours until you could feel the flutter of his pulse against your skin. Too fast, too frantic, but slowing as... You're right, he muttered, voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper, vulnerable perhaps, or the quiet terror of being left behind again. I'll continue to have faith in everyone. His thumb traced the curve of your cheekbone, his expression darkening for a fleeting second before softening again, his touch lingering like a question. Thank you. His voice was barely a whisper, grazing your lips like ember ash before he closed the distance between you. His mouth was fever hot and desperate, his fingers tingling in your hair as he could fuse your souls together through sheer force. It felt like an eternity since you both kissed, his lips chapped, tasting of salt and exhaustion, but still aching familiar. Taiyo squirmed between you with a Polton whine, too young to understand why Daddy was stealing a spot. As he batted at Kojiro's jaw with a tiny hand, Kojiro chuckled against your mouth, the vibration shuddering through you as a revolving pulled back just enough to nuzzle your jealous son's cheek, his breath warm and uneven against Taiyo's flesh skin. Forgive me, my little sunflower, he mumbled, voice thick in laughter with something deeper, something that made your chest ache before pressing another kiss to the crown of your son's head. His fingers never left yours, your grip tightening briefly when Taiyo's hiccups and buried his face back into your neck, reclaiming his territory with a possessive little grumble that had Kojiro's eyes crackling at the corners. Senjo, who had been slightly watching the entire scene unfold, wiped a tear from his eye. The moments like this, small, tender, and aching humanity, that reminded him of why demon slayers fight for. Oh my god. Ka! Suddenly the piece of the hallway scattered as a Katakai crow, its black feathers ruffled as it landed heavily on the windside. Crowed, its deedy eyes glinted in urgency, its ragged claws slicing through the quiet like a blade. Ka! Ka! Emergency announcement! Upper rank 3 Akata has fallen, defeated by Tanjo Kamino and Gyu Tokida. The upper rank is slain. Ka! Kojiro's grip on your hands grumbled, his fingers tightening reflexively, his breath catching in his throat like a fish hook had smogged his lungs. What? Akaza? As in, the Akaza? The very demon who had nearly ripped his heart out from his chest? Gone? His vision swam, the hallway tilting on its axis as Taiyo whimpered against your collarbone, reaching to the sudden tension in his father's body. You turned towards the crow, your own pulse hammering against your ribs. Was this real life now? Just hours ago, Akaza had tried to turn you into a demon, and now he was dead? Though you opted not to tell Kojiro of your grave encounters with Akaza, he might just lose it completely, especially in his current state. The crow's announcement seemed to echo endlessly in the hallway, bouncing off the walls until it filled every crevice, every canvas that seemed to fill. You and Kojiro both soon shared a glance, his remaining eye flickering with something between disbelief and vacancy. The crow's news hung in the air thick, almost tangible, like the scent of rain almost after a drought. A palpable shift rippled through the butterflies' estate halls, and Kojiro exhaled sharply through his nose, his fingers trembling against yours, whether from exhaustion or adrenaline, neither of you could tell. But Tanjiro's name ran through his skull like temple bells. That boy, his had beaten Akaza. He swallowed hard, his throat clanging dryly, and when he blinked, the ceiling blurred momentarily, not from pain, but from pride so fierce it burned behind his eyelids. Even though Kojiro felt proud, he understood that this was not the end. Defeating Akaza was just a small victory. The war was far from over. Muzan and the other upper ranks were still alive. He held your hand tighter, not out of fear, but determination. He couldn't fight, but the fire within him wasn't exhausted. Kojiro's lips slowly curved at the corners, as if the fear that smile might fracture his face. However, when the smile finally appeared, it was bright and beautiful, like a sunbeam piercing through the dark storm clouds. For the first time since awakening, he had felt the embers in his chest grow hot again.